invite Yufei to join us live with video 1 year later, more or less. Hi, Yufei.
Hi, hello.
Thank you for joining us and taking time to share from your experiences of using Kamailio.
Yeah, nice to be here as well.
I'm sure many of you know from the past Kamailio World in Berlin or from the last year, but I let you introduce yourself and start the presentation.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay. Right. So can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks good.
So the topic for today's presentation is Kamailio SBC, and myself, I'm Yufei Tao. I work for Syntech, and I've got my own little consultancy as well. A bit about myself. I got my first degree from China, Beihang University, and got my PhD from York University, and then did some binaural 3D audio acoustics kind of things from University of York. And then I went to the industry to work with some code decoders and SIP clients and SIP, and Kamailio started from back then, which is quite a long time. I am glad that I made also some small contributions to Kamailio, although it's very small, but I'm pretty glad I did some contributions. Right, so I think the purpose of this is basically try to bridge some gaps between beginners' understanding. I remember when I was first starting, I was having a quite steep learning curve. I know Kamailio can do this, and then it's got modules for that, and then I see people discussing about topics. But the question is, why do I want? When do I need it to do this? When do these functions are needed? So I'm preparing some like introductory kind of thing for some topics that some beginners might find interesting. For example, people ask about Kamailio being a SBC, and can we use that as a SBC? And I quote Alex's article here again about this, because he wrote quite many valid points about Kamailio and SBC. Basically, Kamailio is high throughput SIP proxy by heart, and the routing is by the heart of Kamailio, and you have RTPEngine to handle the media side. And the question now becomes actually, what can Kamailio and RTPEngine do? And in terms of SBC, does it cover what you need from it? A bit about Kamailio. Many people are already very familiar, but it's just a short summary to be complete. It's a great open source software, free and transparent, so no backdoors, and then no money you have to pay for using it. And it handles SIP signaling, very high throughput and very robust. And it got over 200 modules. That's what I heard from Henning yesterday. It's very powerful and flexible in routing, because routing is at the heart of Kamailio. About Kamailio, I hear some echoes. And it's got interfaces with various databases, SQL or NoSQL databases. So you can access the database from the Kamailio routing scripts. And it supports various scripting languages, Lua, Python, and JavaScript, all sorts of. And then it provides a Kami infrastructure so that you can write all your routing script using your favorite scripting language rather than the .config format. and it supports many functionalities, authentication, MS, and many. And the very good thing about Kamailio is it supports low-level manipulations. You can fix messages for interoperability. For example, some of the endpoints may not get all the zip headers correct, and it affects the routing downwards. And then you can fix the problems inside Kamailio. And also you can edit, add or remove zip headers. And then even you can, with a UAC module, you can create messages and send. So these are very important features because in some situations that might be tricky when endpoints don't get the messages correct. You can get away with that. After all, getting the calls routed correctly is basically to get the zip messages correct and then send it to the correct destination from the correct socket. That's basically it. And we have great community, very friendly and supportive people. You have a mailing list as our users for questions and answers. And the Kamailio works, which is fun. But unfortunately, it hasn't been offline for 2 years now. Hopefully next year we'll be back to see people face to face. And we've got experts maintaining the code base and adding new features. If people have some specific requirements that's not covered already in the code base, they might get into touch with those experts. They run their consultancy as well, so have a talk with them and see what can be done. And the very good thing is that everybody can contribute. If you intensively use some modules a lot and then you find something missing or something, you could add it yourself and then ask those people to change the code back into the code base. Because there are so many different modules. It's not possible for a few people to have a proper test setup for all the situations. So if you have an environment that's suitable for testing some particular modules, then you're in a very good position in contributing to the code or testing. And a bit about RTPEngine. Again, it's a great open source software. It handles media side. Kamailio handles the signaling, and it relays media. And then it's got a kernel mode for relaying media with very high throughput. Only a few seconds after the call is established, the call is handled in the user space, and then after that is pushed into the kernel space, and then hardly uses much CPU at all. And then you can inject media into specified media stream. And it supports some conversions like encryption, decryption, eyes and no eyes, and codec transcoding, and DTM interworking, etc., etc. And Kamailio controls RTPEngine by sending commands to RTPEngine. Here is one simple SBC example. So when people are thinking about setting up a SBC using Kamailio and RTPEngine, they might be just thinking about something sitting across two network interfaces, say public or private or anything, and handles signaling and media across the network interfaces. So on the public side, you might have remote SIP endpoints, WebRTC clients, or SIP trunks from your providers. And the remote endpoints may be behind NAT, need some NAT Traversal. And on the inside, private network, you might have a bunch of asterisks or free switch or whatever server to provide some extra functionalities. And sitting in the middle, your SBC would do some security features and relay across different network interfaces. Right. And what's needed actually for SBC? In a little bit more detail, we might be thinking about security features because it's called voice firewall. And it needs the capability of relaying across different networks and manipulation of message and header for interrupt purposes, and the NAT traversal and conversions of transport protocols and the encryption, decryption, and some media services. And RTPEngine with Kamailio with RTPEngine can achieve all of these purposes plus more. So if your requirements for an SBC is something like that, then probably Kamailio and RTPEngine would be a good choice. Some security features. The first thing you might be thinking when thinking about a SBC might be network segregation. So you have different network interfaces. So you put the remote endpoints onto different networks. For example, you could have a public-private internet interfaces, network interfaces, and you could have one for containing sensitive information. The other is with non-sensitive information. That's for security purposes. For example, your call flow might contain some sensitive information, but you don't want this information to end up on the other network. So you can filter it out in the middle so that make sure the other side of the network doesn't contain anything sensitive. So Kamailio can listen to and relay across different network interfaces for SIP traffic. And also there's another concept for separating the network, which is the separating the internal traffic from the VoIP traffic onto different networks. For example, for me, I'll put the replication for high availability or database access or some sensitive data you obtain from the call flow and want to send somewhere. I want to put them into a separate network from your VoIP traffic for further security measures. And the Kamailio are well equipped of using different networks to handle these different things. And for traffic interception, we can use Kamailio to do anti-DOS, rate limiting, traffic filtering, and check permissions, access control, all these things, authentication, topology hiding, and many, many more. And for relaying SIP traffic across different networks, for example, here, if you have your SBC with a public and a private network interfaces, on the public interface, you've got SIP trunks and remote endpoints. On the private interface, you need to access like asterisk, free switch, or whatever. And then when your call comes in from one interface, you want to force the send socket onto another interface. Then you can have basically two ways. You can set either the FS or the FSN. I think the force socket name was available since version 5.4. So for example, you have your Kamailio.config or whatever included config file defining the listening socket. And then here you can give a name for the socket. And in the scripting, routing script file, in this example is a Lua, you can set the force socket to be something like that. Or alternatively, you could set just the socket name, which is more convenient. And then you do your relay. Transport conversion is another thing you could be using Kamailio for. It supports different transport protocols. And on one call leg, you could use one transport protocol. And then on the other one, you can use something different. For example, you could use it to terminate TLS connections. For example, on the public network interface, calls coming in are encrypted, while on the internal one, you could just send it off using UDP, for example. And also you can connect SIP and WebRTC clients. Okay, and NAT Traversal. So this is for Kamailio to work with remote endpoints behind NAT, rather than Kamailio itself behind NAT, which is what you would see when you deploy in a cloud deployment. So in order to work with NATed endpoints, you could use a NAT helper module, for example. The basic idea is basically it uses like a function for checking whether the client is behind the NAT. You could have different flags set here to tell Kamailio which header it checks to decide whether it's behind NAT. And then set contact alias function, which adds an alias parameter containing the real received IP port transport protocol to the contact URI before reading it off. And then another one, handle URI alias, is for in-dialog requests. When they come in, Kamailio will check the alias parameters in the request URI. So in this example, we have Alice and Bob. Alice is behind NAT, but he's got a public IP 1234, and Bob have a public IP of 56778. And then when Alice sends an invite to Kamailio, it contains a contact with an internal IP, which is not routable. And then Kamailio detects using this function, detects Alice is actually behind the NAT. So it adds a alias parameter into the contact, and then before sending to Bob. So the new contact will contain a extra alias parameter containing the real received IP port and transport protocol, which is one, which is a UDP here. And when Bob returns a OK, he says contact address is a 10 dot, which is an internal IP as well. And then Kamailio does something similar. It adds an alias to the OK and then sends to Alice. And then when Alice sends a ACK back, it copies exactly the peers, which is Bob's contact, into the request URI. And then send to Kamailio. And Kamailio, on checking this request URI, seeing this alias, which is a routable IP, so it will be using this alias to route this request. And then you removes that as well. And the in-dialog request from the other direction is basically the same. It copies the peers contact header into the request URI and then send to Kamailio. Kamailio will use this alias IP to route to Alice. Here, basically, I've omitted a lot of details. So yeah, I have a link for the example at the end of the slides. You can have a look. And for media, we have RTPEngine, which is growing more and more powerful by the day. It's really amazing. Is a standalone application. You can let it run on the same box as a Kamailio, or you can run it on a different separate box. And then Kamailio's RTPEngine module contains the functions to control the RTPEngine behavior from inside the Kamailio scripts. And it relays across different network interfaces as well. And it does a bunch of conversions. So basically, RTPEngine treats the two codecs as different entities anyway. So you can do different things to different codecs. And here are some examples. It's hard to find a a universal script, but you can find some good examples and then get what you need from those. Yeah, basically there's a NAT Traversal example here that's in Lua format, and then something about RTPEngine codec transcoding. What do you do with that? I think, and then another example many people already know already, the WebRTC to SIP interop. I find them very helpful myself. So hopefully people can get something running. That's it. It's from me. So if you have any questions or something, you can ask or email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Yufei. Thank you. I wanted to thanks again for helping also with coding. And yeah, as I mentioned, SBC, it's always an interesting concept, which we agree on the text chat that might be hard to define it properly. So maybe Ole wants to add a little bit more. And
No, not really. Thank you, Yufei, for a really good presentation. That you were very educational and presented all the components in a very good way. We had one question on the channel where there was a question if you can place this Kamailio server in the DMZ.
Hey, what
So,
is that?
the demilitarized zone. Normally you have a network behind a firewall, but I think what you're saying is that your Kamailio have different interfaces for different networks. Right.
Yeah, Kamailio can listen on different network interfaces, and then you can do all the necessary checks and then decide when to relay it across, when to reject it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that in one of the earlier slides, that this is a firewall, really, a SIP-based firewall. A question from me then, you talk about Kamailio and RTPEngine, but if you run an SBC, what kind of other protection and monitoring do you have to watch network traffic, bad attempts at hacking and other things? Do you have any other software in the server?
You could use Homer for monitoring as well. And for anti-attacking, Kamailio itself can do a lot of like anti-DOS or limit the rate of the call. And because you can see all the details of the messages, you can have all sorts of custom logic in there to decide what to do with each message.
Yeah, so you're talking about Pike and the rate limit module and the other modules we have. But for other traffic, I mean, you could have SSH attacks and other things. Do you have IP tables up and running for protection?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a different, a lower level protection from the OS itself. Of course, you should set up the correct firewalls, IP tables on your box as well to protect your, and protect as tight as possible for each network interface. So you can, that's the idea. You need to separate different functionalities onto different network interfaces, so you don't expose everything.
Now we're getting more questions from the YouTube channel here. There was one question about if you've done any IPv6 to IPv4 translation mediation on an SBC.
I have not done it, but I know it's possible from a long time ago.
I can say that I've done it plenty of times with Kamailio, so I agree with you that with Kamailio and RTPEngine, you can surely do that in your SBC as well. What about high availability? It's a question from DMSF 100.
High availability. In last year's presentation, I did a topic on high availability. So basically, for both Kamailio and RTPEngine, you could make the call never drop. with a few seconds gap.
Sweet. That was the actual next question here. So maybe we can, if Fred can help us add a link in the chat channel to that presentation, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'll look for it now.
And oh, we're getting questions here. This was really interesting, obviously. Can one RTP engine be managed by a couple of Kamailios? Can it be shared?
Yes, I think so. I've done a couple of Kamailios sharing a couple of RTP engines. That is possible. Great. I think that was all the questions. Again, thank you very, very much for a great presentation. Thank you. I look forward to your next presentation already. Thank you.